Good Monday morning, everybody. We have got a show for you today. Here's what you have to look forward to kick your week off. So, Love and Tua got paid. All right, what is next for Dak in this situation? You know, he's looking around wondering when he's going to see some cash. Plus, KD gets cleared an hour before the U.S.'s home opener against Serbia. And guess what? He went off the bench and he managed to blow things up. We will talk about how Team USA is thriving. Plus, all weekend teams. You guys, the Olympics, they're underway. We got to talk about it. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, and our buddy Jason Fitz hanging out here in place of my dad, who's off golf in Pebble Beach, having some fun right now. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. David Hellman will join us from the NFL on Fox Pod to talk about a little bit of that Dak Prescott fallout from all these contracts from over the weekend. Of course, our buddy Jason Fitz, who's sitting in with us today. You can catch him over on Yahoo Sports, hosting a lot of great content for them there. Although right now, Jason, you're basically on summer tour, getting ready for the fall course load, but Jason's background, for anyone unfamiliar, also spent 7 years as the fiddle player in the band Perry, classically trained violinist from Juilliard. And now you've been sitting, and I saw you were hanging out with Jordan Davis the other day. You're going apparently sitting in with Collective Soul. So you're really leaning back into the music business for this summer. So maybe we can still get some sports takes out of you in the midst of that.
Look, I got takes on takes on takes waiting to get out, Mike. Like, that's the glorious thing. But yeah, it's nice to walk out on stage. Like, it was nice of Jordan to let me sit in with him. You know, walk out and play a couple songs in front of 12, 13,000 people. You tip the cap, and then you're like, I'm out. I don't have to sleep on a tour bus tonight. It's nice. So, like, going to do the same thing. Xfinity Amphitheater, going to sit in with Collective Soul and hang out, watch the show from the side of the stage, pretend like I'm cool for a day, and then move about the cabin. This is the perfect way for me. Mike, I can just pick it up. I can play for a second, and then I can be like, that was nice. That filled that need, and then I can move on. This is for musicians. Like, for offensive linemen, I don't know what you guys do. Like, other than just, you know, sit there and watch quote movies and group showers. I don't know how you get the old offensive line needs out, but you know, this is what we do in music.
Jason, question.
No, that's a great point.
Sorry,
well, I've always made the point, Jesse, that when you play football, especially as a sport, once you're done, you're done. You don't get a lot of chances to relive the glory days, to do a lot of that stuff and scratch the itch. In that same way, being a musician or being someone who sings is, in my mind, a lot like playing a sport like golf or tennis, where you can always go back out and do that somewhat recreationally, even if maybe, because I'm sure at this point you haven't played as much as often, so you're probably not in the same form you were when you were in the band, but still good enough to clearly go out there and party right now.
Still better than most. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, but I just need to know, do you, like, routinely during the day, Fitz, you know, how often are you just grabbing the fiddle and just, like, going at it in your house?
Jordan texted me like 2 days in advance and said, here are the songs we're going to do. Here's the two songs. The morning of, I picked up the violin. I listened to the two songs. I was like, yeah, I got this. I haven't played in any real way in probably 6 months, and haven't really played in probably a year. I ran it a couple of times. I showed up at sound check. We ran each song once, and then we got out on stage. Like, it's like riding a bike, though. Like, not that I know how to ride a bike, but I will say this: having played the violin,
you don't know how to ride a bike?
No, Mike, I don't know how to ride a bike, and I can barely swim. Like, I don't belong anywhere near anything outdoors. Like, we know this, but no, I think for me, like, I played the violin at this point for, you know, roughly 43 years of my life. It's just an extension of what I do and who I am. So I feel like if you told me I had to play for my supper and you handed me the violin and you said, tonight, 20,000 people, you got to go rip it, I'd still eat just fine. Like, that is the one thing. There's a lot of things I'm not good at. That's the one thing in my life that I know that I can pick up and still be great.
All right, so before we get to the quarterback contract news that broke on Friday from this week, and Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, both very, I think, interesting ways they insert into the quarterback market, talking about where they slot in price-wise and what that tells us, not only about the Dak Prescott deal, but one other quarterback that actually came to mind for me before anyone else when I saw the deal for Tua Tagovailoa. Fitz, you were also the musical director for the band Perry, so I figured between your lack of love for aquatics and bicycles, perfect person to talk about the Olympics opening ceremonies that we saw at the end of last week. That was a fever dream. Apparently, it's already been pulled off of YouTube because various sources around the powers that be of the world were not a big fan of France basically leaning into threesomes and beheadings for the central thesis for one of the more entertaining opening ceremonies I've ever seen. I mean, Lady Gaga went out there and ripped it. There was a heavy metal band playing some Marie Antoinette themed thing right on the side of a building. The Eiffel Tower obviously got some action in there. So I was a big fan of all of it. It was fun because you would lose track of the fact that they were actually introducing these teams all on boats throughout their time. We get a bunch of great crops of LeBron James memes since he was the flag bearer. Everyone on the boat in Team USA is making fun of him for looking like Captain America, looking like he was crossing the Delaware. So Fitz, from your standpoint and background, as you looked at that maybe through a different lens, were you a fan of what they did for the opening ceremony?
No, I thought the opening ceremonies were great. And by the way, everybody that's complaining about all of the little things that they didn't like, and get over it. Like this is France's moment, not to keep you happy, but to show what they want about their country. Like if France, they spent years putting that thing together. You know that they were proud of the whole thing. You can't walk it back now. If you spent years in rehearsals and meetings and designs trying to get everything together, and that's what you put out, you can't then turn around and be like, well, we'll take it down. No, you knew in the meetings, you knew in the organization, you knew exactly what was going to happen. Some of it I think could have been sped up a little bit, could have been executed a little bit. I got bored sometimes, but I'm also not sitting here in my field saying, oh my God, they did something I find offensive. Turn the channel. My God, like the Olympics don't have to be for everybody. It's France's opportunity to show who France wants to be. If you don't want to support it, sit down, shut up, and don't watch it.
My favorite thing was trying to watch all the various announcers that they had put together for that, which included Peyton Manning, Kelly Clarkson, Hoda Kotb, Mike Tirico running traffic on all that, sitting there and trying to commentate and find places around one of the more bizarre opening ceremonies I'd ever seen to insert in there. And there was just nothing. Like, I felt bad because there's not a lot of like known beats in the way that was going, Jesse, where you'd be able to get in there and actually say something that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a fever dream, like we mentioned, and I will point out, I bet France is super proud of it, but the IOC is the one that pulled the video from their YouTube channel, from their website and everything. So
wait, Jesse, that's disingenuous though, because you want to tell me that the IOC wasn't involved in the conversations of knowing, like I can go back to stage design. Like when we put tours together, we would sit down at a computer and you'd see everything. There was like digital versions of all of us and it would walk through the whole thing and everybody from management to the label, everybody watched the show. Like the IOC has known for months exactly what that was going to look like. So it's cowardice for them now to turn around and be like, oh, we really think that the IOC had no idea what France was going to do and then they pull it down. That's just soft.
Of course they knew, but they're gonna go like this and be like, France, the croissants. Yeah. We didn't do it.
It is true. I don't think of the IOC as this place, a bastion of morality that's going to stand by their beliefs during hard times. They're going to blow whichever way the wind and money blow and get themselves out of Dodge and protect their own ass, because that's how it generally tends to go with them. We have more on the Olympics coming up in about 10 minutes as we will look at Team USA's very, very strong start to the basketball front for our country, as well as a number of other events later on in the all-weekend team. But, Jason, let's get to the quarterback contracts that we had also going into this weekend. A Friday news dump for the ages as Tua Tagovailoa and Jordan Love both finally get the paydays that we have been talking about for the majority of the summer here. And Jesse, they were a doozy, but both very different and very interesting in the way they were each structured.
Yeah, so Tua had his extension, right? So it's 4 years, $212.4 million, okay? And then Jordan Love signing a 4-year, $220 million contract extension with the Packers. It included a $75 million signing bonus. Sheesh! Okay, pretty impressive. You can see all the stats right here on your screen. And guys, Tua was pumped. He grabbed the mic at practice on Sunday to show his excitement for his new deal here.
I tell you what, show me your money! Hey, we just want to say, on behalf of the Miami Dolphins organization, thank you guys for taking your Sunday out coming up. We're going to need you guys to hype us up. It's hot out here. And keep the team rolling. Let's go!
I I'd be excited too, wouldn't you? I mean, come on.
I would
a
be
lot
at
of
work.
money.
Like, I'm sorry. I'm taking at least a day after I get $270 million in the bank to just lay around like Scrooge McDuck in a bed full of coins. Like, I'm not even going to work the next day, Mike.
It is amazing. That is exactly how someone that just got that much money guaranteed, especially, we'll talk about where the actual guarantee slot, that's exactly how you should sound. It's also a reminder of what Nick Saban was able to do for so long at Alabama, because you would never have dreamed of seeing that kind of personality from Tua when he was at college at Alabama. That's just not how those guys got down. So watching him grab the mic liberated down here in Mike McDaniel's Dolphins outfit is kind of hilarious as background noise. But we popped the graphic right there, Fitz. Tua Tagovailoa in terms of average per year, and this is, for anyone unfamiliar, this is always the game when you've got agents and players negotiating contracts, is trying to figure out how we're going to make my player feel the love. And with Tua, it's pretty interesting. You look at a number of different metrics. You can look at average per year, which $55 million is now where the highest quarterbacks in the NFL slot. Jordan Love joins that group alongside Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. Tua Tagovailoa was really interesting in a lot of different metrics. Contract eerily similar to what we saw for Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions. And you could argue two quarterbacks in very similar situations in terms of being in quality offenses, being talked about as someone that benefits a lot from their offensive coordinator. For Jared Goff, obviously, Ben Johnson, who's stuck around Detroit for the last few years. And for Tua, it's been well documented, the love affair with him and Mike McDaniel since he's come over there. And so whether it's the average per year, whether it's some of the guarantees, whether it's the percentage of the salary cap that he's taking up, Fitz, almost everything was about $100,000 higher than the Jared Goff deal. So are you surprised that he wasn't pushing for more market-setting money and actually seems to slot into a pretty sensible place for the Dolphins contract-wise?
I mean, a little bit, yes. But I also think that there is a level of, hey, let's just do something reasonable here. The one thing that I find really interesting about Tua, always in the conversation that comes up, is his health, right? And it's health because of everything we saw with the head injuries. The one thing I would say to that is if you talk to Tua, and I talked to his brother during college football season a couple of years ago about everything, they made it very clear that they went to every doctor known to man. The family sat down, Tua sat down, Talia sat down, the whole family sat down. The organization has talked to doctors. Like, they're obviously clearly very confident as individuals and as an organization that health is not a factor. So the one but that we all want to put onto it is the memory we have of watching his reaction after he hit the field so hard. And we remember that because it was so vivid, but it can't be part of the conversation because everybody involved has already told you they're comfortable moving forward, from the player to the team. So I'm not surprised he got a big deal. I am a little surprised that it came in under market value, only because of what you said, Mike. This is all about ego at this point, and usually quarterbacks want to be at the top of the mountain.
Well, it's usually about timing and proximity. And if you're a quarterback who's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL coming up on a deal, most teams who are especially in contention, the way the Miami Dolphins are, and that's important in the backdrop of this, you're not going to forfeit your place in the current structure of the NFL when you believe you've got a chance to win the AFC East this year and be a team that pushes for Super Bowl contention based on how your offense especially performed last year with Tua at the helm. You've put so much time in, and you're at such a point that obviously you're not going to balk right now. And they could have played some franchise tag games and done some things like that, but this is the right move for them at this juncture. But to get him, you look at, we put up the total guaranteed number, the amount fully guaranteed, and NFL contracts we know are kind of written on toilet paper. And so these are the things you've really got to pay attention to. Being at just $93 million or so, which Jordan Love got $100 million fully guaranteed. Jared Goff got $113 fully guaranteed in his deal. Like, it is a little bit on the lower side. And maybe part of that's injury. Maybe part of that's the Miami Dolphins also saying, hey, you benefit a lot from the structure around here. And Jason, all of that didn't make me think of Dak Prescott, who we'll talk about relative to this, but did make me think a little bit of Brock Purdy and the 49ers deal that's coming up next year. Two very similar situations and quarterbacks that were insanely statistically productive in the last year. Both of them that I think do things even within these paint by numbers offenses that people try and act like devalue the quarterback. Both do things that are outside of that structure enough, especially last season, that show, hey, these are really capable quarterbacks and guys that are an asset and help value add to this system. I thought of the Brock Purdy deal and wondered, all right, is it going to be as simple as, hey, now you make the market setting money here, especially because Brock's history hasn't included injury up until this point? Or is there going to be something maybe more along these lines, since he is one of these guys that benefits from the Shanahan-McVay offenses that have become so in vogue now?
You actually really planted a seed in my brain a year ago. I rarely like to give you this much credit, but I will. You planted a seed in my brain a year ago about Brock Purdy because, as you know, I've long said I don't really care why he's successful. I just care that he's successful. So to say that it's a system, I think also forgives the fact that the organization, if the 49ers could simply make any quarterback successful, they would have made Trey Lance successful. There's less egg on their face for the wasted draft pick. Jimmy G would still be their quarterback. They wouldn't be hunting, right? So for me, I look so much at Brock Purdy, and I've said loudly and often over the last year at Yahoo, I don't care why Brock Purdy is successful. I simply care that he is successful. But you said a year ago, let's see if that tone changes when we see the dollars that will be assigned to his name soon. And I can't get that thought out of my head because now it does get interesting because in my mind, it's very simple that we look at it and say, well, Brock deserves exactly what Tua got. That makes total sense. Maybe a little bit more depending on what he does this year. That all makes sense. But also that changes the entire way the 49ers are going to have to build the organization around him. So I do think it's a bit of a conundrum. Like they're stuck in a bit of a gherkin here, like a little pickle, right? Like, because we don't know at this point what happens. Pickle reference had to happen. What happens at this point if they take away some of those weapons and they're paying him so much money? It gets complicated for a situation that I don't want to make complicated, Mike.
No, because you're right. Jason, his ad, I think, is fearlessness into that offense. He pushes the ball in places that I don't think those other guys were comfortable. One, because of experience. The other, maybe just because of ability and top-end success in Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think Brock Purdy coming up in an environment where so many things are well set for him, whether it's the scheme that he's operating in, the way that he's protected because of that, all the weapons he has to throw to, it's allowed him to go out there and play without fear because he's got so many great options around him, and it's built up these good habits that have turned him into that value add. And to your point, they've got a bunch of veteran talent on that team that they've got to contend with. You look at the Jordan Love deal now, who is getting that $55 million per year average, despite having played in far fewer games than everybody else we're talking about right now. This is really a gamble on the upside, continued growth that really we saw from week 9 last year on for Jordan Love. You look at him last season, weeks 1 through 8, 57.7 completion percentage is about 30th in the NFL, 41.6% success rate was 24th. And then you go week 9 through the wild card game, 69.1% completion percentage was 4th best in the NFL. Success rate was 51 and a third best in the NFL. He turned it on in the back half of the season, helped lead them into the playoffs. But he's doing it, Jason, with an extremely young core, especially on offense. We've talked ad nauseum about this being the youngest receiver core in the NFL and them getting to grow together. And so you can pay your quarterback, even relatively inexperienced, because of the talent and upside you saw last year and not feel like it's going to bite into your ability to retain a lot of the roster that is so young around him.
I guess, but I'm going to be honest, Mike, like this is the one that makes me uncomfortable. And it's because I love proof of concept. And, I think Jordan Love, the last half of the season was absolutely incredible, but we overvalue playoff performance. We overvalue it in the conversation about the problems with Dak. We forget that he was number 2 in the MVP voting. We overvalue the fact that Jordan Love went in and was lights out in the playoffs. And that just erases things like a dreadful Monday Night Football game against the Raiders team that never should have been in that football game to begin with. So for me, like I always remember when I was young, I'm going to make an old man reference here. There was a time where people thought Rick Meyer was going to be better than Drew Bledsoe after their rookie year because Rick Meyer looked absolutely unstoppable. You can have a good run of games. I'm uncomfortable, proof of concept. I'm uncomfortable giving any quarterback. I don't care who it is. If you've given me 8 good games, I'm uncomfortable giving you that kind of money. I absolutely would have had no problem with the Packers sitting back and letting it play out and doing some options and spending more just to make sure. Because I think Jordan Love's going to be great. I think. But we're basing that off of half of one season. And that makes me really that feels like you're marrying her after the 3rd date. And that just feels like it's a little bit too much commitment.
I do think, though, at this point, Fitz, we have seen in the NFL, there is a premium on when you feel like you've got your guy, especially at this position, planting your flag early. This deal, we know, by next offseason is going to age beautifully. And again, the juncture that this team is at right now, who we think could be a real contender with the Detroit Lions in the NFC North this season, is going to probably age pretty well with all that in mind. And when you think you know at this position, and especially for a guy like this that did well at avoiding sacks, did a lot of the other things that make other guys on the offense better, I think you're always better off going out there and trying to get ahead of this as opposed to finding yourself in the Cowboys situation and all of a sudden dragging behind.
Only if it works, though. Like the whole thing is if he comes out next year and defense isn't caught up after the time and he's just not as good. Now, if he's just in the realm of mediocrity, now you've paid great money to a mediocre player, which is what every smart person tells me is the worst thing you can do as a team.
It is. It's always a gamble. And I think with any player, this league especially, it's hard to hold year to year because of how violent the sport is. But I think them betting early is going to wind up being a smart decision. We'll get more on that as we talk to David Hellman later on about some quarterback stuff. But coming up next, USA. Kevin Durant coming out and putting on his Captain America outfit early in the Paris games next.
to GoJo and Golic. It's time for our Liquid IV Olympic recap. If hydrating were an Olympic sport, you would win the gold. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code GoJo at checkout. So guys, Team USA taking care of business in their first game of pool play on Sunday against Serbia. Okay, an impressive 110-84 victory, which was aided by a healthy Kevin Durant. Thank you very much. Coming off the bench, scoring 23 points. So guys, he's cleared to play less than an hour before the game. We know he's been struggling with that calf injury. He comes in, instant impact, nails 8 shots, 5 of them three-pointers, 23 points in 17 minutes of play. Very impressive. So leading up to this game, guys, first real contest for Team USA men, we did nitpick them a lot. And because we saw some flashes of stuff that scared us leading up to this opening game. So how do we feel now that we've seen them in action absolutely crushing Serbia?
Yeah, Jason, this is what we expected, finally. And surprise, surprise, adding arguably, I won't say arguably, the most accomplished Olympian in the history of our men's basketball program, and Kevin Durant back to the lineup, suddenly makes life a lot easier. I, for one, am shocked, but it was interesting, especially listening to him talk about how uncertain the road felt at certain points, how much he was, and I'm sure dealing with some experiences and bad memories from the injuries that we had seen for him involving his calf and lower body during the NBA, to battle back through all that and come out and have that half that he did off the bench, where you get the punctuation at the buzzer at the end of the first half of a perfect outing from the field, perfect from beyond the three-point arc. He helped space the floor for this team in a way that, honestly, watching it alongside LeBron James as two of the elder statesmen on a roster that is older, as Joel Embiid pointed out, watching the two of them go out there and dominate did warm my basketball heart a little bit as someone who's watching his favorite stars get closer and closer to aging out of the game.
Yeah, you make a good point about the age portion of this. And also, it always stuns me when you watch this team early on. They still push the ball too much. They still turn the ball over too much. There was a spot in the first quarter where it was like, are we okay here? And then all of a sudden we were very okay, which just reminds everybody that we just need to relax a little bit with this basketball team. They're still trying to gel those. They're still trying to figure it out. And ultimately, it only takes any one of those great superstars to go off, and they're going to be dominant. To see LeBron play with the level of joy that is just palpable from him on the court, though, Mike, is like, I think that's the thing that stood out to me watching it. Like, LeBron is genuinely just having the time of his life. So he's got like old man strength while he's out there dominating everybody, and he's just laughing along the way. I love this version of the King.
Well, this is All-Star Game LeBron. This is LeBron playing with great players again in a way that's not happening all the time. Sans Anthony Davis, who's also on the Olympic roster with him in Los Angeles at this point in his career. So everything looks and feels better for LeBron right now. He talked about as much, and I do think, Fitz, this is also the boost of international competition for these guys. We saw this with Mike Trout and everybody coming off the World Baseball Classic going into last year's MLB season, where we saw these guys playing the game and expressing themselves, a lot of them more introverted guys, differently than ever before, because there's just some added extra element. You heard these guys talking about the environment. Steph Curry and LeBron James professing to butterflies before a game, and they might have just being a little bit cliche and complimentary to the environment there, but there is something about walking in, trying to put this together on the fly. These other teams have had the cores of their roster playing together for a long time. A lot of these other programs, Team USA is coming in and trying to microwave a lot of these results with incredible players. And to your point, it's going to create and introduce some moments that are a little bit uncomfortable, where it looks a little bit out of control. But then ultimately you watch it when it stabilizes last night, and you're reminded why most of us feel so comfortable in believing the U.S. is going to go out and take gold from here on out. And this only bolstered that. Now, Fitz, there was the nitpicking that went on after the fact, though, about the way that playing time was distributed out here. Joel Embiid still looking somewhat sluggish and going at what?
You're saying nitpicking? Like, I mean, Jason Tatum, 0 minutes. That's not nitpicking. Like, we're all looking at it saying, what's that moment? You can speak to this better than anybody else on this show. What would it feel like to have sat on the bench the whole damn game and then realize, all right, I just bench warmed at the Olympics and then walk into the showers? Like, 0 minutes. Like, that's
well, you
not
don't need a
nitpicking.
shower when you go into the showers. Just,
I mean,
you can skip
probably,
that part.
I mean, maybe it was a little humid in the arena.
Shower that day. Just, pop that one in, pop the clothes back on, head back to the hotel room and get on your cardboard Olympic bed. No, listen, Jason, I can understand that. And Steve Kerr after said, I felt like an idiot not playing him during this time period, but also did mention that this would change. Here was Steve Kerr after the game talking about this obvious omission of the lineup.
I talked to him today before the game that it may play out this way, just with Kevin coming back and the lineups that I wanted to get to. But that'll change. Jason's going to play. Every game's going to be different based on matchups. He's a total pro. He's first team All-NBA 3 years in a row. I felt like an idiot not playing him. But in a 40-minute game, you can't play more than 10. You really can't. And so I think he's an amazing guy, great player, and handled it beautifully, and he'll be back out there next game.
Now, Jason, I see you shaking your head there. I can't imagine you're angrier than Bill Simmons, who authored the take that more of LeBron's minutes should be going to Jason Tatum at this point, even though we've seen what LeBron has looked like so far in the games and what Jason Tatum looked like in the lead-ups. It wasn't great, albeit it was fewer minutes than he's used to. Certainly, he can be more ball dominant in that offense in Boston, although they spread the love a fair amount there. Derek White and Drew Holiday, two important pieces from that run, both got playing time in this game, and especially in the case of Drew Holiday, really impactful minutes in this game, pouring in some important buckets down the home stretch of this. But you're not buying this from Steve Kerr, Fitz.
I'm just saying that at some point, if we just peel everything that we love about sports away and we just apply regular humanity to this concept, you and I work together at the Four Letters, right? If you and I were walking in and there was a big show going on, and they're like, hey, Mike and Fitz are going to do this hour on ESPN at the time. If we had walked in, and as we walked in, they're like, sorry, Golic and Greeny are taking it. We'd have been like, I get it. I understand. We'd have packed our stuff out. We'd have left. We'd have gone and have a meal. No big deal. If you take that same analogy, though, and all of a sudden it's the Stephen A's of the world and the Greenies and the Golic Seniors and everybody, all the biggest names, the SVPs, and then they walk into this super broadcast and we're like, sorry, man, Stephen A., the way the minutes are playing out, we don't need you today. You want to tell me that doesn't get received some kind of way? Like, we could say all the right things about Tatum. You have one of the best players in the world in an all-star team environment that was selected to be part of it, that now has to grapple with the whole emotional portion of this. If anyone
is used to this, it's Jason Tatum. Being on a Celtics team where he routinely saw a guy in Jaylen Brown take over enough to win finals MVP on the team that was supposed to be quote-unquote his, playing on one of the deepest rosters in basketball, and being used to the idea that this could belong to anyone on any given night. Fitz, I don't begrudge you. I'm sure there's ego involved in this, and I'm sure Jason Tatum in a private moment is absolutely livid. I get all that. But to Steve Kerr's point, when you've got a roster with this much talent on it, and you've got only so many minutes to divvy up out there on the court, and you've got a certain way you want to attack this, you're allowed to. Like we see what do we see in the NBA playoffs all the time, Fitz? People on the team, role players especially, relegated to fewer minutes in certain series, and then other series where they're a better matchup, all of a sudden they've got to come online here. You have that same task with Team USA. You're just doing it with the best players in the world, so someone's always going to be left holding the bag. And for Jason Tatum, again, in the lead up to this, relative to the rest of the roster, I can't act totally surprised. It is somewhat stunning to see a guy that was on the best team in the NBA get 0 minutes, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it because this is sports, and at some point, everyone's got to swallow their pride a little bit and take a backseat for a second. I don't think it's going to happen again, and look at the result. They went over there and they drove Serbia into the ground.
I don't disagree with any of that. When is the last time you think Jason Tatum sat on the bench of a game healthy and played 0 minutes? Like, we're not talking about a minimal role. We're talking all day long. We can say he went back to his hotel room and did breathing exercises to meditate his way through where this is going. No, there's just a part of it of, holy cow, I didn't even get on the court. That just feels to me like it's jarring. And I think we'll see an overcorrection. I'll bet you anything he gets a ton of minutes in the next one just so people like me shut up about it. And that's going to be the Kerr's way of being like, hey, screw you, I know what I'm doing. I get it. I just think that there's a little bit more drama behind it. That's all.
I mean, Steve Kerr is also not the coach of a little league team right now where it's his job to get everybody playing time so that Timmy doesn't go back home crying. These guys are pros, and the goal is to win a gold medal here. No one's crying for Tyrese Halliburton. Where are the Tyrese Halliburton defenders in all of this right now? All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. You sickos in the Boston studio out in DraftKings. For everyone watching on YouTube, the DraftKings Network, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, you're seeing a little shot into our studio of the Deadpool and Wolverine popcorn bucket with Wolverine's head and a really, really pronounced tongue and just a lot of innuendo that, quite honestly, I'm not comfortable with being in the same building that Emerson Latzia will soon inhabit. We need to get that out of there for everyone's safety, including the popcorn buckets. But Jason, outside of a very suggestive popcorn bucket that I know Ryan Reynolds had a personal hand in because that guy is an absolute wild child, that movie seems to be crushing it right now. You went and saw it this weekend, right? It looks great.
Yeah, I went and saw it. It was hysterical. It was amazing. But as you well know, Mike, look, I've seen all the Deadpools. I really like Deadpool, but I haven't seen any of the rest of the Marvel universe. So like when Wolverine came out and wearing the yellow outfit, like I was just like, all right. I didn't like the whole crowd cheered. I was like, I guess that's a good moment. Like when some of the cameos appeared and people are like, it was awesome though. Like I love being in a theater on opening night with mega fans around me that are just yelling and screaming. So I loved it. I didn't get the signature popcorn bucket though, and I regret it now because it looks like it's kind of cool. Like I should have got it for the house.
You don't need it. It's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's probably. I wouldn't be comfortable with you just alone in the same house as that either. They also had, we talked about on Friday on the show, the custom Xbox controllers that have butts.
Yeah.
Leather-clad butts on the controllers that, again, dangerous in the wrong hand. So the promotional materials, though, no arguing the results, apparently working since Deadpool and Wolverine kind of crushed it at the box office this weekend.
Yeah, it was the highest R-rated opening of all time, both worldwide and domestic. So
yeah, they're the butts.
The butt-shaped controllers, the interesting shaped popcorn holder, all of it apparently did its job.
I don't know why, Mike, you have a problem with the butt-shaped controllers, considering how much you talk about thick with two C's. I mean, that's just giving you like a little bit. You get that you get that little firm grasp in your hands. Let's go.
It's just saying the quiet part out loud. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Like I want to leave a little bit to the imagination. We know you need it spelled out explicitly for you, Jason, and your experience with the new college football 25 game is now going to change forever with those controllers in your hands. I pray to God you turn the rumble off, or else we're going to have a real weird situation playing out in front of us here, just like USA basketball has playing out in the periphery right now. Because, guys, we've got an interesting situation that's sort of gone on with Jaylen Brown off to the side of this. We talked about Jason Tatum getting no minutes for Team USA and their win over Serbia this weekend. That sort of pales in comparison to how weird it's getting around the Jaylen Brown situation right now, where after Kawhi Leonard especially was taken off the Team USA roster when the injury proved to be too much and they went to replace him, and we saw it ended up being his Celtics teammate Derek White and not Jaylen Brown, where he starts tweeting about this and protests a little bit. There's now become an interesting back and forth with him and some of the powers that be at USA Basketball. Here was Grant Hill, who's a part of the Team USA Basketball organization, on with Dan Patrick last week talking about what went into the decision involving Jaylen Brown.
I spoke to his agent. We, I don't know if that was before or after, things went out on Twitter, but yeah, I mean, I think this idea that there's a conspiracy theory. I always love a good conspiracy theory, but it was really truly a basketball decision, and these are tough decisions.
Jaylen Brown responded on Twitter calling Grant Hill, again, the Team USA managing director, saying, "Grant Hill calling me a conspiracy theorist is disappointing. I've been a VP since I was 21 years old, and I have a great understanding." Fitz, he had multiple stops along the way, has basically implied that he believes that Nike, the shoe company that he is not a part of here, played a role in him not being selected here. How much are you buying or selling Jaylen Brown's complaints about being left off this roster still?
I don't think that that's why he was left off the roster, truly. But I do understand why his logic would take him there. And this is one of those both things can be true at once moments where it can be true that he's been a VP since he's 21 and he runs an empire. It can also be true that he believes he was left off for a certain reason. And it can also be true that some people view that as a conspiracy theory. And that's just sort of the way the world works on this. So this is one of those interesting moments in communication where I feel like you got a lot of people that are saying some of the same things. It's just the way they're receiving what's being said has everybody feeling some kind of way about what's being said about them. This is one of those moments where if you're Brown, you're trying to sort of figure out in your head, you're trying to figure out the path that left you off this team, and you've decided that this is the only answer that makes sense. And unfortunately, when that happens so often with people that have these theories, whether they're conspiracy theories or just theories of the why, it becomes the thing you're known for. I understand why Grant Hill is saying what he's saying. I understand why Brown's reacting the way he's reacting. I think, honestly, what you have are two grown-ass men here that probably need to sit in a room and have an honest conversation with each other.
Okay, so his latest tweet, guys, he retweeted something that was talking about how in '92, the Dream Team had to wear the Reebok warm-ups, and they were Nike guys, and how he's talking about how Jordan covered the Nike logo with the American flag, and he's like, yeah, sneaker politics have been playing a role in this for years. So look,
when I was on the Blake Shelton tour, Blake Shelton, we were opening for Blake. That whole tour was endorsed by Pepsi. And so every single time, the day before we would go into an amphitheater, they had to go in and take every sign out because even a backstage piece of footage that had the Coke logo on it could be a violation of the terms of his contract. Now, if you ask anybody that knows, most people with their red Solo cups still had Diet Coke in there, not Diet Pepsi, right? Like that's just, everybody just figures out this is what you have to do to work around sponsorships. Working around sponsorships is not a conspiracy theory. That's a normal part of celebrity life. You took a deal somewhere, but you still want to wear what you want to wear, so you find ways to hide it, Mike. Like I just don't think that that's revolutionary.
No, it happens in almost every sport here. My dad's told stories for years about how guys with certain cleat deals in the NFL who would spat over the top of them and had to put the stickers on to still make sure the advertisers got the love would occasionally get outed when they'd be on a magazine cover or a picture would all of a sudden reveal the underside of the cleat and it would be the wrong brand and all these things. So you're absolutely right. That counts to it. At the same time, I won't discount the idea totally that sneaker politics play a role in basketball. We saw, especially in college hoops after the FBI probe, how deep the rabbit hole can go with the way that some of those sneaker companies played a role in player acquisition at certain schools and how that was an influential part of the process there. So I won't act like it's nothing. At the same time, I also think that when we're talking about such a tertiary spot down on the Team USA roster and the fact that, hey, actual basketball continuity might play a role and that it's not just, hey, we'll pick the best player over and over is also something that can make sense to me. I do think there's a bit of irony that after we spent this whole season talking about this Celtics team and trying to talk about whose team it was and who's actually the alpha on this squad and how much of it's about the depth of the roster versus the two main superstars, that the two main superstars from that roster who both had to jockey for credit at various points in the last number of years, despite being two of the most talented players in the NBA at the time, under 28 years old, are now both faced with that same task on the Olympic stage as Grant Hill and the rest of the USA basketball organization, as Steve Kerr, the coach now, looks at them and says, yeah, well, we got all these other really great guys, and so we're going to play them and we're going to do this with them. Some of them even being your teammates has to kind of, I don't know if it's like Alanis Morissette irony at this point, but I think that's where it kind of fits in for me.
It's also got to be so difficult for a player at his level to look around and be like, yeah, I just probably wasn't the right fit for that team. Like we talked earlier about ego. It's got to be really hard for somebody that knows that he's one of the best in the world at doing this thing to then turn around and say, but I wasn't the right fit. And that guy is. Like, that takes a level of self-understanding that I don't think a lot of people would have and may not agree with, by the way, because we also know that half the time your ego sits there and says, and I don't use ego as a bad word. I think ego is deserved for people that have accomplished great things in the 1%. So you want to come in and be like, I'm great at this. I deserve that shot. I understand where he's coming from.
Oh, yeah, listen, ego is necessary at this level. Like, I always joke, I think I was a little bit too self-aware as a player to actually be successful on top end. Some of the physical stuff also played a role in that, but you all, to an extent, have to have so much belief in yourself that it borders on egomania, because that's what it does take to succeed against competitors at this level. And so I don't doubt Jaylen Brown feels, coming off a finals MVP and a championship, that he absolutely should have been on that roster. And I could still believe, even sans conspiracies thrown in over the top of it, that, hey, Team USA making the choices they did is going to work out just fine for them. And this is not the most egregious misstep that I've ever seen. Plenty more time for that. But coming up next, week 1 live for DFS on DraftKings. We'll get you a look at some of the best players available next on GoJo and Golic.
To GoJo and Golic, Jesse Cofield here, Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz in for senior. And guys, DFS salaries for week 1 are officially live in the DK lobby. It feels like Christmas around here. We love it. We love to see it. We got some cool contests that you can enter. Okay, we have the NFL 4 million fantasy football millionaire. $1 million goes to first place. It's $5 to enter. So let's talk about some of these salaries for week 1. We got some of the most expensive guys on the board. Going to be Josh Allen. Okay, he is going to cost you $8K versus the Cardinals. Jonathan Taylor for running backs, $7,800. CeeDee Lamb leading the way for wide receivers at $8,900. Trey McBride, tight end, $6,100. And the Cowboys DST is going to be $3,900. So guys, what do we think about these week 1 salaries? It's our first look at how things are going to be shaken out.
Jesse, it's so true in the way that this makes my body feel, like the serotonin rush of this. Coming off a weekend where I said watching the Olympics, having the Gold Zone on with Scott Hansen and Andrew Siciliano, having all these different sports. Fitz, you mentioned being able to wake up at almost any hour and see it. It feels like great training for college football and the NFL, where you're used to wall-to-wall coverage. You're having to make decisions about what you're going to allocate to what screen and how you're going to fuel yourself through that entire time, knowing you don't want to move from the couch at all. So all of this feels like home. That being said, DFS for DK might be the most home that I feel. Long before I ever started working here, I played in a weekend DFS league with my family and a couple of friends here. Darius Rucker, friend of the program, in that league as well. And so I love hunting for value on this right here. So, Jason, you are traditionally very frugal man. I can't imagine there's a world where you're going to go off the top and take the very high-priced Josh Allen, even though, and this is the dilemma when you're talking about fantasy and DFS, is we're always going to see prorated for mobile quarterbacks, dual threat guys. And this year especially, Josh Allen is walking into a season where more is going to be asked of him, the way it was in the back half of last year, than a lot of other quarterbacks in the NFL, given the way they've jettisoned weapon this offseason and not really replaced all of them in Gabe Davis and certainly Stephon Diggs. So, Jason, how are you feeling about the quarterbacks from a fantasy standpoint heading into the 2024 season?
So I like Josh for everything you just mentioned, because covering the NFL draft this year for Yahoo, we did a show with Damian Harris, who obviously knows the Bills incredibly well. And one thing he made clear is that organizationally, Buffalo believes that Josh Allen accounts for a certain number of touchdowns, and they don't care what's around him. They believe that he still accounts for that number of touchdowns. So now I'm looking at it and saying, if the Bills believe that the secret to their offense is still going to be roll it out and put it on Allen's legs or shoulders, that's still going to result in something. And if he doesn't have trust with his receivers, he can be mobile enough to be able to get so much done in the red zone. I think Josh Allen is still a really smart play, even at the high elevation. And plus, I think that Cardinals defense is going to be trash. So I actually really like that matchup for Josh Allen. The one on the list that for me, it stands out as the toughest to absorb is Jonathan Taylor taking on the Titans. Not because I don't like Jonathan Taylor, but because I think the Titans are just a wild, who knows this year. New coaching staff, new regime, new everything. And then Jonathan Taylor coming in, frankly, on a Colts team that we don't know what they look like with Anthony Richardson either. We remember what they looked like for a short sample last year, but I don't know. I'm risk averse week one with Jonathan Taylor more than I am with Josh Allen.
So the interesting part here is you mentioned the season-long production. That is absolutely what a team like the Buffalo Bills expects from Josh Allen. But you're right, so much of DFS is week-to-week and matchup-based, and I think that's what makes it interesting for quarterbacks. When I build lineups, I always pick the quarterback like 4th or 5th on the list of players as I'm drafting them. I go a lot more of the running back and receiver talent first because at the end of the day, like in season-long fantasy, quarterback's only going to account for so much. And so you look further on down that list. You mentioned Anthony Richardson. Fascinating look at him, a quarterback coming into ostensibly his first real season after getting nicked through a couple of games last year. He cost you $6,300 and going up against the Houston Texans in that week, a defense that last year, certainly one of the better defenses in the NFL overall, maybe run stuffing an issue at a couple of points there. But Anthony Richardson is a quarterback that a lot of people expect to have a really special Josh Allen type of season in Shane Steichen's offense. So if you're looking especially for a dual threat guy that can get you a lot of value, I think him down just $100 more than Trevor Lawrence and $100 less than Kyler Murray. If you want to bet on upside the way we talked about with Jordan Love earlier, that's a pretty interesting place to start to look a lot this season before he gets expensive once you start to get that proof of concept.
I want Anthony Richardson to be wildly successful. I just think we need to remember what we were saying when he was drafted, which was really good potential, kind of up and down, and needs game reps. He just needs reps. The most consequential thing that happened last year for the Colts, to me, isn't that they won football games. It's that Anthony Richardson didn't get the reps that he needs. So I genuinely have no idea. Like, AR scares the hell out of me because when he was in, he looked great. But then all of a sudden, he's not in. And now we got to figure out the rust portion of it. We also got to figure out the adaptation portion of it, the evolution of where he is as a player, knowing the things that we said coming out. That one makes me nervous, but I'm very quarterback nervous, in case you can't tell coming into this. Maybe it's because my favorite team has Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I just find myself in a world of hurt when it comes to quarterbacks.
I was going to say, this is an all politics or local situation, and Jason Fitz staring at an uncertain future under center in Las Vegas probably has a little bit to do with all of this. So I think some other ones interesting there. To look at Baker Mayfield, week one against a Washington defense that's going to be in transition right now, could be a fascinating matchup in year two. Although Baker Mayfield, as we've talked about, going to be in a different offense this year, one more out of that Shanahan-McVay tree than it was last year, since his offensive coordinator and Canales is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. I think could be fascinating there. Geno Smith in that new offense in Seattle, as the Washington contingent comes over from there to get ready to take them into the future. We've talked so much about Mike McDonald's defense during the offseason. I don't think we've talked nearly enough about that Seattle offense and how different that group is going to look as well. Jason, let's look at some of the running backs, though. Jonathan Taylor, the one you mentioned there, right below him, Bijan Robinson, the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in that first matchup here. And this really seems to be a bet of how much do we believe the departure of Arthur Smith and that coordinator, head coach in general, was holding back one of the most talented running backs in the NFL that people felt was constantly misused last year. Are you buying now this year, Jason, as Zach Robinson, a guy with that Shanahan-McVay DNA all over him, comes over to call plays for the first time in Raheem Morris's team, is going to be the one that helps Bijan Robinson elevate to a guy that could be RB1?
Yes, I believe that wholeheartedly, and I think that's a great, like, just the subtraction of Arthur Smith helps in every possible way. No offense to Arthur, although I don't know how I can not take offense to that. But the other side of it is, Mike, as you well know, I don't love quarterbacks that are 3,722 years old and coming off an Achilles injury. So I do get a little nervous that we're just presuming that Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers will be just fine. So how the quarterback situation plays out, because that will impact just the ability to run that offense. But having said that, if Kirk is able to come in and play the way that they believe he can play, he also has the understanding of the basic tenets of that offense. He's going to be able to be a field general for them on the field. I think the offense is going to be explosive from week one. Like, the Falcons are not even sneaky good. The Falcons are just flat out good this year. They fixed the main hole that they had, which was Desmond Ridder. So I think, yes, Bijan takes a massive step forward this year and is a home run for most people.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering that when Sean McVay first got to Los Angeles, the DNA of that team heavily relied on the running back and Todd Gurley, who was on the roster. And if you look at even the latest iteration, Kyron Williams last year, the Notre Dame product, became a huge focal point of that offense. Now, getting into the weeds, I don't think they'll be as downhill, duo-centric, gap run-centric as that team was. This was an offensive line in Atlanta that returns all of their starters. That was a lot more of an outside zone team, some of the stuff that we traditionally saw from Shanahan and McVay and these guys. And so I do think there'll be a lot of that in there. I think you look further down on the list, Fitz, people are going to be looking at how does the carry allocation slot out for Najee Harris in that backfield with Jaylen Warren in Pittsburgh as they go into a new offense that had some interesting choices with the running back last year. Arthur Smith now lives over in Pittsburgh, so that's certainly going to be interesting. We talked about for Kenneth Walker and company in Seattle how that offense might change things. But of course, I look further down the list from the running backs. Devon Achane in Miami, $6,800. That guy is a home run waiting to happen. I saw headlines recently. He's going to be a guy that if he pops off the way that people believe he can when healthy, is going to win a lot of people their fantasy leagues as we head into this fall. So that's all I'm saying is, obviously, there's going to be some big names at the top. They have earned their place there. Christian McCaffrey is going to be a mainstay at running back all season long. Justin Jefferson's going to be up top at wide receiver. It's important to go out there and hunt those individual matchups, to look at the defense you're going to get that week and try and make it work. We're going to look at the offenses and defenses coming up as our division previews roll along. Those dirty birds Fitz mentioned, we're going to head to the NFC South and talk about them next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, we got football on Thursday, the Hall of Fame game. So we've been leading up to this, going through and doing previews team by team. Last week, we did the AFC. This week, we are focusing on the NFC. So here's how it's going down. Today, we're going to hit the NFC South. Tuesday, NFC North. Wednesday, NFC East. Thursday, NFC West. And Friday, we'll just get a full NFC outlook. Put a bow on it, if you know what I mean. So, NFC South today. Let's go. A major free agent signing, Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons, perhaps has turned this division on its head a little bit. Okay, fellas. Atlanta, the favorites to win it at -120. Now on DK Sportsbook, okay, the Falcons have 48% of the handle, 69% of the bets to win the NFC South. Okay, last year's winners, the Bucks, now sitting at +320. Okay, despite returning a lot of their key players. So let's start here with Tampa. You're the champs until you aren't. What is the outlook for Baker's Bucks this season? Woo!
I'm sorry. I almost got emotional hearing that the Hall of Fame game was finally coming up this week. I was so distracted. My heart is so full, and I can't wait to watch that damn game. But in terms of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Fitz, we talked about this a little bit in the last segment as we were looking at some of the DFS lineup potentials for week one. Baker Mayfield and this offense now undergoing a very real transition as we've seen them going back through their time with Bruce Arians at the helm. The NFL had kind of been divided into a few offensive camps, and we had seen so much of the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan tree of coaches running a lot of this outside zone, running a lot of bootleg stuff, deep play action, all these things that it was built off of here, while the Bruce Arians led late version of the Bucks, especially from Tom Brady on, were more of a downhill, heavy play action, go right at you, under center stuff. Even last year when they got in the gun a little bit more with Dave Canales, now going to join the former half of that. Liam Cohen, who had spent his time going back and forth between Kentucky and the Los Angeles Rams as a guy who had cut his teeth under that regime, comes over as the offensive coordinator for this team that still has a lot of the same parts involved. But Fitz, while I don't imagine it's going to be wholesale change, because as a coach coming in, especially with a veteran outfit that's all spent a ton of time together, I don't know if you always want to go too far in that direction, but the DNA of this team is going to look a little bit different. I think Baker Mayfield has found a home that believes in him, but he's going to have a new voice in his ear. And so I do think it's understandable that they're put one spot behind, even though that Atlanta team has certainly taken and absorbed a bunch of change. If healthy and on his best day, Kirk Cousins is still the better quarterback, and he's got a ton of weapons around him. For Tampa Bay, a lot of those weapons are aging, and the face of that team has changed in some critical areas.
Yeah, Tampa Bay finds themselves in a bit of a curious situation right now, Mike, because to your point, are they good enough to really compete in the NFC for a Super Bowl? No. Are they bad enough to be bad? No. They're sort of stuck like a lot of this division in that middle ground. And I think part of the reason we get concerned about Baker is because, let's be honest, we've seen greatness from Baker and we've seen absolute horrid football from Baker. So it's easy to sit there and say, well, he found his footing. And I talked to him at the Super Bowl. He stressed the fact that at Tampa, he felt so comfortable just to be himself and felt like for the first time in his life, there were no expectations and all of these things. So I understand that Baker sort of found himself, but Canales was a big part of helping him find himself in that process. So to me, when I've seen a quarterback play incredibly well and also play poorly enough that multiple franchises have let him walk out the door, I become concerned about a new voice. Because will that new voice be on the same page in the same way? Sometimes there's a magic that just clicks, like you and I when we slow dance at a karaoke bar. I don't know that we get that out of the new offensive coordinator system with Baker. So for me, it just makes me a little nervous. I'm not down on the Bucs. I'm just not high on the Bucs, if that makes sense.
I actually am excited and think this offense could be really interesting because, again, you've still got Mike Evans, you've still got Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, Cade Otton, Rachaad White in the backfield. They had Bucky Irvin, the running back out of Oregon. That's one of my favorite players in the draft this year. That offensive line, pay Tristan Wirfs. Don't think about it, pay Tristan Wirfs. Right. Whatever you're thinking in your brain about potentially here, you pay Tristan Wirfs, you make him the highest paid tackle in the NFL, and you prosper. The guy switched sides last year for you. He's been incredible since he got there out of Iowa. Pay him, prosper. for do not pass go, have him collect $200. The interesting thing, though, Fitz, is I actually do think Liam Cohen is a great offensive coordinator for what you just described, because he was the architect, remember, of one of Will Levis's best seasons in college at Kentucky, the first year where we really thought he could be something. And I got to call a couple of those games. Liam Cohen, talking to him in those meetings, sounds like a guy who's going to be a head coach one day. And I actually got a chance to talk to Will Levis's parents, and they raved about the connection that Will and Liam had there. So I think this is a coordinator that's uniquely adept, again, coming from a really emotionally intelligent coaching tree that we've seen with Sean McVay, to go out there and to be able to connect in that way with a guy in Baker Mayfield, who I think you're getting the best of now. We went from the young and brash version to a guy that got humbled a bit by the process to now someone who's found a way to weaponize all of that confidence and charisma to be the leader of that team. It's just going to be interesting defensively if they're able to go out there and support that in that same way. So I'll be curious with that team. I think they're slotted in the exact right spot, Fitz. I think in this division in particular, they're absolutely going to have a chance to go out there and defend their title. But the Atlanta Falcons have made this really interesting, and we talked about them a lot, so why don't we get to them a little bit now? Fitz, you are someone that we've mentioned is risk-averse at the quarterback position, yet you seem to be buying the Atlanta Falcons for an older quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. Does that not scare you some, as we just immediately cast the die for them to be a playoff team coming out of the South?
No, it terrifies me. It absolutely terrifies me. Same logic that I have with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Don't start booking your hotels yet until we actually know that your quarterback's healthy and can play. It terrifies me. Now, I think the conversation about Kirk got skewed at some point, and he's perceived as a far worse quarterback than he actually is. So if Kirk is healthy, I believe that the sky's the limit for the Falcons. They win the division. They have a shot to be very competitive in the NFC. I don't think that they're in the same tier as the top, but they're in that second level. Like, they're the next tier down in the NFC. I love that. But you are right. Kirk Cousins' Achilles, that just makes me nervous. When you think about weight shift and you think about what goes into legs, particularly playing the quarterback position, I'm not even talking about mobility. I'm just talking about delivering the football. And then you think about what we saw during quarterback, when you saw just what a pounding Kirk Cousins takes. Like we talk all the time about quarterbacks got to protect themselves. Kirk Cousins does not protect himself. He gets absolutely annihilated because he holds onto the ball to the last second, which is great for the production that he needs for his team. But yeah, I'm scared to death that a quarterback at his age, even not coming off an Achilles, but you add the Achilles to it. Yeah, if this goes wrong for the Falcons, then they're a 5-win football team trying to figure out what to do with their quarterback situation, and everybody's upset.
I was going to say, I don't know if there's much figuring out what they're going to do with their quarterback situation, Fitz, if this goes wrong. They drafted their quarterback situation 8th overall, much to the dismay of a lot of people out there who thought they could use some help, because defensively, that's the worry for this team right after the health of your quarterback is what's going to go on with this defense. Raheem Morris comes over, and as a head coach whose background is on that side of the ball, is going to be tasked with helping that out. Jimmy Lake comes over as the coordinator. Remember the old UW head coach and defensive coordinator there. They shift back to a 3-4, but a lot of people expected and believed they should go in a draft that did not have a ton of top-end defensive talent, at least take the best off the board where they had that available there. They go Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback. So they are insured to an extent if their quarterback gets hurt. Michael Penix Jr. looked at as one of the guys that can come in and is most pro-ready because he's got the most snaps under his belt. He's also incredibly injured, has a lot of injury in his history. I won't say injury prone because he was healthy the last 2 years at Washington, but he also comes in still with understandable questions about what he can do under pressure in his offense that we saw creep up in critical moments at Washington, and some questions about maybe touch in certain areas of the field. But you've got an accomplished quarterback under center there, but he's still a rookie. So all the same questions that we say about the other rookies we expect to play a bunch would apply to him there then, and still I'd imagine make you a little bit nervous as an Atlanta fan, even if Bijan Robinson everyone expects to pop off. Drake London is a name we probably don't talk about enough as a beneficiary of the upgrades at quarterback, who could be a huge fantasy viability and also just a great player for them in general, the former first-round pick.
And by the way, when you talk about the defense, particularly going back to the draft, that's, I think, why we all thought an edge rusher would make sense of some sort. Getting somebody that could disrupt the passing game on the other side, because you are right. This defense, in my mind, is going to surrender points, which means the offense is going to have pressure from day one to put points up. This is not a team that's going to be able to average 20 points a game and win a bunch of football games. They're going to have to get more production than that. So it's interesting because I think the world of Penix coming out. Like I think there's a lot of potential there, but that potential is not going to help them this season in my mind. So you're right. Their biggest weakness is how are they going to slow people down? And if they don't have the best of their quarterback and they're trying to develop Penix while they're doing it, I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I would agree. You mentioned edge rusher as a potential issue there. They do get Braylon Trice out of Washington, who was a really quality player on a Huskies team that made it to a national championship. Ruka Rohoro out of Clemson was the guy they took in the second round. So they did attack defense, especially up front in the other rounds of the draft outside of the first round. And we know the sticker shock on that quarterback pick is still going to linger into the season. But I'm much more, I think, interested in how the head coach and now coordinator, who both are on the defensive side of the ball, go and operate this unit schematically, certainly. And then offensively, can they put up enough points to kind of insulate them from that as they go through the growing pains of inserting a lot of key young players into the lineup on defense? I'm bullish on this team, Fitz. I am saying that if Kirk Cousins, who we've already seen back out at practice now, albeit without pads on, moving around pretty well, if he comes back and is any semblance of the player we saw last year, who was in the midst of statistically his best season, I think this offense is going to be a juggernaut. I think especially in the NFC South, that's enough to make them the favorite in the division in my mind, and I would absolutely be comfortable with them in that spot. Fitz, let's look at the New Orleans Saints here. We had Aaron Schatz on from FTN last week in the Almanac talking about what could be, at least storyline-wise, one of the most boring teams in the NFL heading into that season. And boring is not always bad. Football coaches everywhere would kill for boring in the way that the Saints have now. But for Dennis Allen and this bunch, Fitz, how are you feeling about the Saints walking into this season? Derek Carr back under the helm for another year with them right now. And really, that's kind of it. This was a team that really struggled with big plays last year. Outside of Taysom Hill, no one in their running back room, I believe, had a play over 20 yards during that season. Alvin Kamara coming into this year with some contract worries. Where are you at on the Saints and your belief in them at this point?
Yeah, so often we assign value, and I would say to anybody that's looking at predictions, ask yourself what the world thinks of your head coach and what the world thinks of your quarterback, and that will echo, those two together will echo what the world predicts for your favorite football team. If they don't believe in your coach and quarterback combo, then they're going to predict your team to finish in last. For me, the Saints quarterback and coach combo just screams mediocrity. You mentioned having a hard time getting the ball down the field. Well, has that not been a part of Derek Carr's career for many? Like, he loves to dump the ball off. Like, he's going to take the safe completion that's right there in front of him and try and keep moving the sticks. And that's really effective for him in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that as a down. Like, I understand why that is who he is as a quarterback, but we can't act like we're surprised at this point in his career that he doesn't take a lot of risks downfield. It feels like the sort of offense that you're going to be able to cheat up in front of. And as we all know, if you can get after their quarterback, if you can get after Derek Carr, he's either going to get rid of the ball quickly or he's going to basically fold, right? So I have a hard time believing in this team, but they're not bad enough to be terrible. They feel to me like the epitome of a 7-win football team, where at the end of the year, you're like, they won a few games they shouldn't have. They lost a few games they shouldn't have. That just feels like who they are. They're not particularly going to beat you on paper. Like, if you're picking the video game, if you're playing Madden, nobody's walking into the room saying, I'm going to kick your butt. I want to be the Saints, right? Like, it's a mediocre roster with a mediocre quarterback with a mediocre coach that's going to have a mediocre season.
Yeah, I mean, but that could still be enough, especially with their schedule, which, according to last year's opponent record, is tied for the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. Aaron Schatz and the folks at FTN agreed with that. The way they break it down, too, is one of the easier roads to a postseason berth in the NFL for a team. And Fitz, you mentioned a couple of things about this roster. Pressure on Derek Carr. They went out there and invested in probably my favorite offensive lineman in the draft. Maybe not, outside of Joe Alt and the guys that upper crust. Talisi Fuanga out of Oregon State, who was a right tackle in college and could probably slot there here as, the way this offensive line had come together. This has always been a program that invested heavily in that, but the Trevor Penning swing last year didn't feel like it bore you the immediate fruit that you wanted. I think Talisi's a guy that could slot in right away and be really productive and impactful for you in that way. You got the other Alabama quarterback in Kool-Aid McKinstry, who everyone thought was going to be the guy before Terrion Arnold flashed the way he did this last year, to add to a strength that you've already had traditionally in this secondary. I think they're solid, right? You're finally done with the Michael Thomas portion of things that have been such a soap opera for the last few seasons there. Chris Olave, this is his team, yet another Ohio State receiver that's going to be the main guy in that group. But you're right. I do think they're going to be a middle-of-the-pack team. But in this division, that's enough to keep you in contention, because all we've talked about for the other teams so far, volatility. And this team, at the very least, is going to come over here, and they're not going to wow you with anything, but I do think they're going to be there holding serve long enough to have a say in this division before it's all said and done.
I blame you, by the way, for my man crush on Fuanga, because last year in draft prep, you talked about him so much that I just fell in love. I wanted him to be a Raider. So I share your man crush on Talisi Fuanga, by the way, which is it's a weird thing for two men to say to each other on this show, but let's go.
Hey, we love beef and we love quality beef around here, and he represents that at the highest order here. But now it's time to get to the final team in our division and a little cash it or trash it, Jesse, as we take a look at the 2024 Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, let's talk Panthers. They had the fewest wins in the NFL last year, right? 2-15. Like you said, they're the subject of this week's Cash It or Trash It. Cash It or Trash It is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. So, fellas, Panthers plus 650 to have the fewest wins again next season. Actually, though, that is third behind the Patriots and Broncos. So, cash it or trash it. The Panthers end up with the worst record once again.
Whew.
What do we think? Exciting.
Man, I'll go trash it. Only because, Fitz, I at least look at this team who had a lot of issues last year. You don't wind up 2-15 without having a lot of issues here. And albeit defensively, they jettisoned their best player. I think the way they've managed the defensive side of the ball and some of those critical free agents has been suspect at best at times. What they weren't able to recruit for Brian Burns, as we heard more and more about the potential trades that were in their past there, that stuff kind of sucks. But on the other side of this, offensively, you put all your eggs in the Bryce Young basket last year, and you didn't do enough around him. No one could get open, and he certainly wasn't protected nearly well enough the entire season. And so what did they go out and do this year? They signed hundreds of, $100 million plus in offensive line contracts between Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt up front. On the outside, you brought Deontay Johnson over from the Pittsburgh Steelers. You drafted Xavier Legette. In the running back field, too, you also added with Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, who's a quality back. And so I look and say, all right, they did what they needed to do to find out about their young quarterback this year. I was a guy that was bullish on Bryce Young coming out of the draft. That confidence certainly took a little bit of a hit, but they bolstered the interior of an offensive line that needs to be strong to protect a smaller quarterback, and they gave him some more guys to throw to besides aging Adam Thielen. And so I have to believe, going from year one to year two, Bryce Young not having to rehab or anything this offseason like a couple of his other former rookie counterparts, I think that's going to pay enough dividends for me to where they climb out of the absolute cellar and maybe work their way more towards a normal basement.
No, look, the chances that somebody's going to have the worst record in the league 3 years in a row is slim anyway. But a couple of things here. Dave Canales comes in as a head coach that we talked about earlier. We give a lot of credit because of his ability to communicate to quarterbacks. I'll also go back to a former Alabama quarterback that I worked with when Bryce was being drafted, talked a lot about the fact that internally at Alabama, when they asked the strengths and weaknesses of Bryce, one of the things that came up consistently as a weakness was that he wasn't particularly great at communicating to the offensive line what needed to be done to do pickups, right? That was the thing that was said before he was ever drafted. What did we see in his rookie year? He struggled behind an offensive line that wasn't good enough. Mike, it's not just that they spent money on the offensive line. It's that they brought in guys that know the offensive line. They didn't just go get draft capital. They brought in guys that have played in the league, guys that have seen a lot of things. I think Bryce needed that help. There's nothing wrong with saying a young quarterback maybe needs more experience in front of him to help him with communication issues that he's having. So I think this makes him better in the pocket. I think it's going to help him have better understanding of how to get himself out of some situations. And I'm not giving up on Bryce Young yet. Look, CJ Stroud had an incredible year. That's okay. That doesn't mean that suddenly we have to put Bryce into this mountain of suck over here. Like there's some in between on this. So let's see what Bryce looks like with a competent offensive line in front of him, with a play caller that can help him, with better weapons around him. Look, I don't think Carolina is going to turn around and win 8 games, but I do think that they normalize themselves into that 5 or 6 win total where you're sitting here saying, hey, 6-11, and we feel like maybe we're building towards the right thing. That feels to me pretty reasonable. And there is absolutely no reason to give the Patriots any benefit of the doubt that they're going to do anything other than be awful this year. I will not do that for the Panthers as we stand right now.
Yeah, I think the Washington Commanders, there's going to be a lot of teams in that conversation for the NFL's basement, maybe even the New York Giants, depending on how things go in what's a pivotal year for Daniel Jones. But I'm with you. Dave Canales, who, again, was part of some stuff with Geno Smith, certainly then Baker Mayfield last year, has a well-earned reputation of being the guy that gets his quarterbacks who have traditionally struggled some better answers. And everything you just described comes down to you've got to give Bryce Young more answers to the question so he can get the ball out of his hands quicker and not feel like he's got to play hero ball there. Coming up next, we'll get to some heroes from the weekend coming off an Olympic start for the ages. Our all-weekend team from Paris next on GoJo and Golic. All right, y'all, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, and Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports, kind enough to be sitting in for my dad, Mike Golic Sr., who's out for the day, and kind enough to help us out with our all-weekend team. A look back at some of the best competitors from over the weekend, and in this case, an Olympic version. We had so many sports going on, so much stuff we were excited about that we're going to give you our honorable mention, second team and first team all-weekend members from the sights and sounds in Paris that were. And Jason, there's no surprise here. I'll start us off with our honorable mention candidate. We interviewed him on the show and helped send him off to Paris. Notre Dame's very own Chris Giuliano was a part of the gold medal outfit for the 4x100 meter freestyle relay that took gold. And as importantly as anything, and listen, it's not just that Chris is a proud Fighting Irish member who has brought great glory to that Notre Dame swimming program with his national championship prowess and now being a part of this team, but it's that he helped them beat Australia. You saw that commercial and all the stuff about Michael Phelps watching the video of the Australian players ticked off at the American cowbell and talking all this cash stuff about that. Now, Australia did win the 4x1 free relay on the women's side and managed to hold that smack talk over. But I just love that somebody went out there. It's amazing. I'll be as critical of the United States in certain junctures and want our country to be better in a lot of areas. But the minute it gets to this kind of global competition and you got a country like Australia out there talking that talk, I am seeing red, and Chris Giuliano on this relay helped satisfy the anger that had built up inside of me that I didn't even know existed.
What a homer. Like, what you found a way to work Notre Dame into this. Like, let's be honest. This is all. If he'd gone to UNLV, would he still be there? I'm just saying, like,
nope.
Yes, but see,
nope.
This is just, admit your bias. That's fine. Look,
I do. I'm wearing my bias. It's right here on my chest. I don't have to admit anything. Y'all know what I'm about. I told you exactly what went into this, but he also helped us slay an international rival in an event that I now decided mattered to me 5 minutes before it started. So yeah, absolutely caked in homerism. Who's your honorable mention pick, Fitz?
Okay, I'm going to give you an honorable mention of the Twitter galaxy. They get the X galaxy, if we want to call it. And I really thought you'd go with this one because anytime we get cooking bacon, Sarah Bacon, Cassidy Cook, synchronized diving, which by the way, like none of us know a damn thing about synchronized diving. But then every single time it starts, we're all watching the TV and immediately the whole room's like, oh, we all think we know what we're watching through all of this process. But the fact that we got a graphic from everybody that like social media blew it up with cooking bacon, that just made me think of you, Mike. Like all I get's turkey bacon in my life. I see the real meats and I just think that's immediately a Mikeism. I thought you would go with food, cooking bacon, winning synchronized. That was a beautiful thing.
I was tempted. It's the most back I had felt as a country in quite some time. They went out there. They took home the silver medal. A big congratulations to them. And I was hungry in the process. So, Jesse, that feels like a win for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything more American than that? Of course, cooking bacon got that. I mean, do you think the rest of the world is just like, dang, the European mind cannot comprehend this?
Listen, French got threesomes in beheading the queen, and we got cooking bacon. We all showed and played our best cards heading into the Olympic Games here, so no one could be upset about that or act all that surprised. Fitz, let's get to our all-weekend second team here. This one plays off something that I heard so much growing up. Matthew Dawson is an Australian field hockey player who actually decided to amputate one of his fingers in order to play in the upcoming Olympic Games. He suffered a fracture on his finger that would have actually held him out should he have gone through the normal process of playing this. The 30-year-old instead decided to have the finger removed from the knuckle up so that he could take part in his third game. So Fitz, this isn't a guy playing in his first Olympic Games. This is his third Olympic Games where he decided that 16 days after he was injured, he was going to go out there and make sure he was ready for the cause, removing, as you can see here, the ring finger from the knuckle up on his right hand. Fitz, this was something that for years as a kid, because Ronnie Lott did this back in the day in the NFL, and my dad used to always ask me and my brother when we were growing up playing Pop Warner football, like, hey, if it meant the difference between you playing in a championship for your team or not, would you be willing to hack off a finger? And as a young athlete and a kid with no concept of life, I was like, yeah, Dad, you could have my finger so that I could play in the national championship. And to be honest, to play in a national title probably would have done that, but would have had some regrets later on in life because sitting here now wanting, I guess that part of your finger is not all that useful.
It's not your whole finger. He didn't have to give up the whole finger.
So there's a portion of your finger that's worth it for it. You guys have lost your minds.
I'd cut off the finger.
You would cut off your finger just to compete. No assurance of a medal. You're cutting off the finger just to finish the. Okay.
What do you need the finger for? It's just like you got 9 others. Like, I mean, it's not, I feel like it's not that big a deal. Like, I was like, cool.
So, no, there's just no way they were just cool about losing and you both have lost your minds. Mike, what would you now, if I told you, hey, you could go start in a Super Bowl, you cutting half a finger off?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A chance to start in a Super Bowl, cut half a finger off without question. And Dawson would have taken months to recover from this had he not elected to do this. And the Olympics come around once every 4 years. These are once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, even though this is technically the third time in his lifetime that he's done this. So, yes, I absolutely endorse this. Absolutely would have done it. And Fitz, it tells me a lot about you and your little baby fiddle player hands that you wouldn't do this. So why don't you give me your second team all weekend pick instead?
It wouldn't take much of a cut, by the way, because my hands are tiny. All right, so I'll go with Léon Marchand, the French swimmer. One of the coolest moments because he was dominating so much that they did the Michael Phelps thing. That's what I call it when they have to pan all the way back to try and get you to see anybody else in the pool, and you still couldn't see. And the crowd cheering as he was coming out of the water with every stroke. I saw one of the commentators say that when you win in front of your home country, you can actually feel the vibrations of the crowd under the water. Such a beautiful moment for France. Such a beautiful moment for a dominant swimmer. Just absolute. When you see that level of I'm so far ahead of everybody that I've already made the turn, I'm underwater, I'm halfway through my last lap, and nobody else has even hit the wall before me, that's just a level of dominance that deserves a mention, Mike.
Yeah, that's the Katie Ledecky that we're used to seeing now. Katie Ledecky, certainly coming back down to earth a little bit in her age as some of the competition is caught up. But Leon Marchand, you're right, who is dubbed the French Michael Phelps, who did beat his world record in the 400 IM, goes and gets gold in the 400 individual medley. So, yeah, he's lived up to the hype. And getting to do that in front of your home crowd has to be such a unique experience. I was watching some of the French gymnasts have to go out there and compete, and you could see some of the nerves competing in front of your home crowd. That's a double-edged sword, and he's managed to go out there and make that look very, very easy. So big congrats to him. We highlighted him on the front end going into it, but Fitz, it's time to get to our first team all weekend. And for both of us, it is Simone Biles. Simone Biles, who now makes her return to the all-around final that'll be coming up on Tuesday. We know after the Olympics in Tokyo, where she pulled out, dealing with the twisties at that time, highlighting the mental strain that these athletes, some of the most physically gifted, and Simone Biles, the most gifted in the history of U.S. women's Olympic gymnastics, one of the best athletes America's produced in our lifetimes, Fitz, now back right where she belongs and doing it through a bit of a calf injury early on in this process, still finding her way back to the top for a chance to get that gold back on her shelf.
Now, watching her, with the foam roller beforehand, and you can see that she's obviously in pain, and then see how fast she sprinted and just nailed it. I mean, that's just did what she does. It's one of the most incredible things, and these are the eras of the Olympics that we have to come together and just appreciate, because Simone and her performance is the sort of thing, Mike, that they're going to be talking about 30, 40, 50 years from now. Like, there are certain gymnasts that are bigger than the sport, that are bigger than the Olympics, that are part of the nation's fabric moving forward. That epitomizes who Simone Biles has become, and her performance over the weekend is exactly why.
So it's a cool moment for her. Suni Lee, her teammate who won gold in Tokyo when Simone pulled out, is also going to be in the all-around final for her, representing Team USA, which is awesome. Suni herself overcame some issues with a kidney disease leading up to this Olympic Games to get back to where she's at. And so it's a great story. The unfortunate part is Jordan Childs, their teammate, posted the fourth best overall score of anyone in competition in the all-around. And yet, because of a rule that's been in place that went all the way back to 1972, when you had the Soviets sweeping the games, to then 2000 when Romania swept them, to where it crept down from each country could only have 3 representatives to now only 2 representatives. This distinction in the name of leveling out competition on the Olympic stage is nauseating to me. How are we turning actual Olympic medals into participation trophies when it should just be, hey, if the best are all coming from some country, then your job as someone else is there to go and stop it. The fact that she's not going to be allowed to compete despite posting one of the best overall sports is ridiculous, that we're doing this kind of politicking and jockeying at this level of competition.
You always stress meritocracy. The Olympics should be the ultimate version of that.
It's embarrassing, and they should remedy that at some point so that things like this don't happen anymore. Let's head to Big D and find out what the hell's going on with Dak Prescott next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, and Jason Fitz. And we spent the time coming off the top of the show today talking about the quarterback contracts that went out over the weekend. Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa both get big time paid. And I know for a lot of us, the first person that people thought of was Dak Prescott, the last remaining outstanding quarterback issue that's been on the hearts and minds of everyone all summer, which meant the first person that I thought of was Dave Hellman, who you guys could check out hosting the NFL on Fox podcast, longtime Cowboys reporter as well. And I'd imagine more than a few people blowing up your phone as those deals went out, Dave. I'm curious what the first thought for you was when you saw these paydays for a couple quarterbacks that had been mentioned alongside Dak all offseason.
Yeah, you're so right, man. It is one of those things where as soon as those deals start coming down, you start getting tweets, texts, phone calls, everybody kind of rechecking in on the situation. And I guess as somebody who, like you said, I mean, I've been around the Cowboys for too long, and this is my second go round with Dak Prescott's contract negotiations. And my first thought, to be brutally honest, was just like, yes, everybody is where I am now. Like everybody is meeting me at this Dak situation, because I've kind of been waiting for this to come to a head really for probably a year and a half. This has been on the horizon, and now Dak is the last unfinished business in this quarterback cycle. And now that it is like one of the true league focal points, I can't wait to see how it resolves and how wacky it gets before it does.
So think about the last time we went through this cycle, a lot of misinformation, a lot of misunderstanding. And most of the people around the team would have told you from the outset that Dak and the Cowboys were going to get it worked out. We were yelling about nothing. Having gone through the cycle last time, now when you go through the cycle this time, are we yelling about nothing?
I think it's a very different situation, because back then Dak was a young player who was obviously was a fourth round pick. So the type of money that a fourth round pick makes compared to a franchise quarterback. He also was in the normal situation for a young player, which is that the Cowboys had club control. They could franchise tag him. They did franchise tag him. They forced him to play out his rookie deal for one more season on that franchise tag in, I believe it was 2020, when he wound up getting hurt. This time around, it's so much different, because Dak, because of what happened last time, was smart enough to negotiate for a no trade clause and a no tag clause and those type of veteran insurances that keep a team from having too much control over you. And that's exactly the situation we're in, where I really think if Dak doesn't get a deal before the season starts, I've been saying this for months, if he doesn't have a deal before the season starts, he's not going to sign one during the season and forego that leverage. And so I think you wind up in a situation where if it's not done by early September, then I don't think it gets done until free agency. And I'm not convinced that the Cowboys have the moolah or the desire to outspend teams in free agency when it gets to that point. So I pretty firmly believe the Cowboys have about 5 weeks to put their money where their mouth is, or else Dak is going to be up for the highest bidder, and I'm not convinced that'll be the Cowboys.
You mentioned a bunch of the different factors around this time. If you had to whittle it down to maybe one or two, why do you think the Cowboys at this juncture have chosen to make it as hard as it's been to get their quarterback, who played at an MVP level last year, signed to a long-term extension?
For whatever reason, and maybe it's the lack of desire to spend top cash, because again, I think people conflate the salary cap with cash spending, right? Like you can be up against the salary cap without actively having a ton of active money going out to players. So whether it is the lack of desire to spend cash at the top of the NFL, whether it is, again, I think there's a stubbornness element, honestly. I've said this for a long time as well. Jerry and Stephen Jones, the Dallas Cowboys are obviously this mega brand in American sports. They kind of sell themselves at this point. I think the Cowboys are used to people clamoring to want to be associated with them, and people even paying to be part of that Cowboys spotlight. And I think there's a stubbornness element where the Cowboys don't like to admit when they're pinned into a corner and have to do what a player wants. If you look at their recent history, there's two types of contracts that get signed in Dallas. And number one is when the player is willing to take less than market value. And those deals happen early. They happen without a lot of fanfare. Trayvon Diggs is a great example recently, where last summer he was willing to sign for something like fifth best cornerback money. And it got done with very little fanfare and everybody was happy. But the minute a player wants top of the market value, it gets drawn out into this situation where we're running up on deadlines and we're breathlessly anticipating what's going to happen. I will say, by and large, in those situations, the Cowboys almost always wind up paying, but they also very rarely negotiate with a guy like Dak who has as much leverage as he does. So that's what I'm fascinated to see is, it's easy to just say, okay, Jerry and Steven are going to draw this out for another month, and then they will finally capitulate and give Dak everything he wants. But Dak has the type of leverage where maybe that won't even be good enough. So I cannot wait to see how this plays out, because at the end of the day, the Cowboys usually pay, but the Cowboys very rarely have this little leverage. And I'm very interested to see how Dak Prescott wields it.
So at the end of last season, I planted my flag on the belief that going into this season, Dak's going to have an MVP type year, and then he's going to walk, and my beloved Raiders are going to sign him. So if he hits the open market, this is the real question. What's that number look like in your mind that the Cowboys aren't going to match, that somebody ridiculously is going to back up to him?
Well, I think the easy way to say it, I've been saying this as well, and I'm not alone. I think a lot of people are here. I think Dak officially, now that Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa didn't do it, I think Dak is going to be the first quarterback to break the $60 million barrier, whether that's 60 flat, 61, 62, whatever. So, for instance, if Dak resigns in Dallas, then I would guess it's a 4-year deal. $60 million, 70 something percent of that guaranteed. So, you're probably talking a little, slightly better than the deals that Tua and Jordan just signed over the weekend. What's interesting, guys, is what happens if Dak hits unrestricted free agency, because then he's not just going to set the market, but he also has so much control over the type of deal that he signs. Remember, the last quarterback that was really in this situation of being good and unrestricted was Kirk Cousins in 2018. And he signed a 3-year, I think it was $84 million. So, top of the market back then was only like $33-35 million. He signed a 3-year, $84 million deal with every dime of it guaranteed. So what if Dak hits the open market and is like, yeah, I'll take 3 years, $180 million, all of it guaranteed, rather than the 4th or 5th year? I think that's totally plausible. So it's a little hard to project when you think about him hitting free agency, because again, to the point of the Raiders, think about some of these teams that are quarterback desperate. There will be a team that's willing, I think, to fully guarantee a 2 or 3 year contract if that's the way Dak wants to do it. So it's a little bit harder to project, but I feel very confident saying the salary is going to start with a 6.
Only about 30 seconds left here, Dave. Yes or no? Ultimately, when it's all said and done, do you think Dak Prescott is a member of the Cowboys at the start of the 2025 season?
Oh, I hate that you're putting me there. I'm going to go by what I always go by, which, like I said, I think when push comes to shove, I think the Cowboys are going to chicken out and they're going to give Dak what he wants. And, the guarantees and all that stuff will have to be right. But at the end of the day, I don't think Jerry Jones is willing to walk away from all pro quarterback play. So I don't feel good about it. But if you're putting me on the spot, I think they'll give in and give him what he wants.
Well, thank you for letting me put you on the spot this morning, buddy. We appreciate the time. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. All right, brother?
Anytime, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, coming up next, I think I might have changed the history of America as we know it with one vacation this summer. I'll tell you how I pulled this off next on GoJo and Golic. y'all, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you missed that or any of our great guests, shout out to Dave Hellman, again, joining us from the NFL on Fox podcast, longtime Cowboys reporter, breaking down the Dak response to the Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa deals. And, of course, our thanks to our friend Jason Fitz, great host over at Yahoo Sports, for hanging out and filling in for my dad today. If you missed any of them, check them out wherever you get our podcast. Make sure you follow all the great work that they're doing. And, of course, you can catch everything right here as soon as we get done on the DraftKings YouTube channel today. Guys, let's start off with this. I took a little trip to Japan this summer. I don't know if I've told you guys over and over and over again about this. One of the big takeaways and things I was told going in over there was, buddy, you got to check out the 7-Eleven. As a gas station food connoisseur, you're going to love what they've got over there. And it didn't disappoint. An array and selection of treats, actual snacks, and food products that made my heart go pitter-patter. Only to come back home to the announcement and news that apparently 7-Eleven is getting ready to introduce its Japanese convenience store products into the American counterpart restaurants here. 7-Eleven boasts more than 13,000 shops across the U.S. and Canada, more than 21,000 in Japan. And so, Jason, Jesse, I'm ready to receive your thank yous for being a diplomat, going over internationally, and making this happen for y'all. Because I promise the gift that you've just received, you have no idea just how great it's going to be.
Look, you went to Japan and you ate at 7-Eleven. Like, this speaks to how different our personalities are. Like, I went to Japan. I was in Kumamoto. I walked into a sushi place. I pointed at a fish. The guy pulled it out of the tank, set it down in front of me, went, whack, bam, 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 and then stuck a stick through it and stuck the meat inside of it. It was still twitching, served it to me as my sushi. That's what I did in Japan. You went to 7-Eleven. Like, a Slurpee's a Slurpee, dude. Like, what are you doing here, man? Like, we got to work on you. I don't think this is a good thing that you brought Japanese 7-Eleven to America. Jesse, I'm completely out on supporting this behavior.
Yeah, I mean, to the surprise of no one, do I frequent 7-Eleven? No, I don't. Am I going to eat the hot food from a 7-Eleven? Absolutely not. I don't want to die prematurely. I am not enthused by this at all. I understand why it's like changing your life, GoJo, but I'm not going to eat wings from 7-Eleven. I'm not going to eat ramen from 7-Eleven that is hot served to me there. Buy a ramen packet. Not going to eat some ramen that's hot off the presses at 7-Eleven, okay? Some teenager in the back, just without gloves on, slapping that together. No, thank you.
So the ramen still comes in a packet here. It's not hot and ready made there. At least the ones I didn't see were. Great egg salad sandwiches there. That was the one I was really told to go after early on. The Cadro rice balls that they have there, and just the rice balls in general. You have no idea. Not a really big breakfast country in terms of eating before noon, like 10 or 11 in the morning. So you really got to get your sustenance from 7-Eleven. And they got more than a few things there to make that happen. So I'm excited for that. The whole cavalcade of treats there. I mean, when we talked and I documented all the different Kit Kat flavors you can get at a place like that. That extends to a lot of other candies that we don't even know about. So, Jesse, I understand this probably isn't going to be for you, but for everybody else here, I would encourage you to expand your horizons, figure out if you like red bean paste, take a look at some of the other savory treats in there, and make it happen for you. If everyone's going to shake their head no, I just let you know. I feel like I've got a well-worn reputation as the snack guy, and I wouldn't lead y'all wrong here.
I mean, Fitz can't eat any of that stuff. That's not an unseasoned chicken breast and rice with broccoli. So,
but also, not for nothing, Mike, I'm just going to throw our friend group under the bus. There might be some conversations that right now you've gotten too willy-nilly with the high scores. Some people disagreed with your Kit Kat score on the what'd you give that, a 9.5 on the whatever the banana?
The Kit Kat McFlurry?
Yeah, like some people said that maybe you're giving out too many 9s. Like maybe right now you're having too much of the candy and you're just only appreciating the candy like it's not separating itself. I think maybe you're becoming a soft judge in your old age.
Wow.
My body may be becoming soft because of all of this, but I can assure you the taste buds have never been more dialed in right now. We are fine-tuning this machine with each and every round. And if you disagree, at GoJo and Golic on Twitter, at Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter, feel free to offer me your own reviews. I will happily accept them. I'm just saying I've been fat for a long time and expanding my palate and my waistline for you guys just to try and help out. Let's get to that, though, Jesse. Jason Fitz has been on a health and fitness journey. Some people might demand that he he get drug tested soon, and that happened to one NBA star as well.
Yeah, Tyrese Maxey has been putting in the work, okay? He is out there working out, getting his reps in, and he posted a video of himself with Chris Johnson. He's a renowned trainer. He's working out. He looks bulked up, right? Okay, look at this man. Look at this man, broadening his shoulders literally. So obviously this hits the internet, and the internet does what it does best. Everybody is, tweeting it, quote tweeting it, saying he's bulking up, he looks incredible, blah, blah, blah. Tyrese Maxey takes to the internet and says, basically, thanks guys, really got drug tested because of y'all. So basically the internet did their thing. The league office said, he does look a little bulked up. Drug test. So that's great.
Well, and we see this happen all the time in pro sports, right? Where a guy has a major performance that comes out of nowhere or does put in a little bit of work in the gym in the offseason and then comes back and is not only immediately accused of that by the internet, but to Jesse's point here, served the paper by the league as well. Jason, as someone that's been working on their body a lot, would you take that as a compliment or a slight that people looked at you and assumed that you would use the needle?
It's the ultimate compliment. And by the way, if somebody wants to just ship me HGH, I'm taking it. Look, I'll take it. Look, I'm on a journey right now, Mike. I'm doing it the right way. I'd cheat if I could. Come on, I got no problem with that. But I will say, I'm a scrawny guy. I went somewhere the other day, saw a mutual friend of ours that I haven't seen in a minute, wearing a tank top because it was particularly hot out, and that mutual friend said, "Oh my God, you look jacked," and I got to be one of the greatest days of my life, one of the greatest days of my life. So I respect it, even if he is juicing. I don't care.
Yeah, no, I do. I agree with you. I think it is the ultimate compliment here as long as you can pass the P test, because for you, there's no consequence if all of a sudden you fail a random drug test. For Tyrese Maxey and for the guys in the NBA, a little bit more serious than that. So congrats to him on seeing the fruits of his labor pay off in a big way. Jesse, let's get to the third here while we're doing a health and fitness kick right now. Brian Daboll, former thick king, now out here skinny in the streets, and something that he and I have in common at the heart of this.
Yeah, okay, so he was asked about his routine here because he's lost a significant amount of weight, and here's what he had to say about it.
Well, the first one where I go, it's called DTR Pilates in Wyckoff. It's a friend of my wife's, and we were having dinner on a Sunday a few months ago, and I said, hey, I think I want to try that. So I started going. First few weeks, I was not too pleased with it. It was pretty sore, but try to stick with it. Go pretty early in the morning. As you get older, there's less things you can do. So we'll see how that goes.
Guys, I'm a Pilates gal, and let me tell you, it is hard AF. You don't think it's going to be hard? Those reformer machines, I think they were used in medieval times to torture people. And look at him, looking like a snack. The Pilates is paying off.
I was going to say, man, what he hinted on there is absolutely right. The further along you go and get up there in age, between time constraints and physical restraints, there's a lot less you can do. It's incredibly low impact. Yeah, you got to go through that initial wave of not being good at it. And what an exciting thing, Fitz, as you get up there in age, to find a thing, something new that you can try and suck at for a little while and then eventually get better at. You usually end up being one of the only guys in there, so everyone helps you out there like you're an idiot, because you are an idiot at the beginning of your Pilates journey. But as someone that, like Jesse, is also incredibly Pilates pilled, has helped me a ton. Happy to see Brian Daboll out here living his best life, looking great heading into 2024.
When are you going to send me tips on this? I haven't tried Pilates yet. Everything's been lifting for me. And but Mike, you know this, I'm particularly wildly unflexible. I feel like if I get on a reformer, I'm going to go my legs are going to separate by 2 inches. And I'm going to be I don't know. Am I too inflexible to do Pilates, Mike?
No.
You
take it slow. This is about, Jesse, it's about strength more than flexibility in Pilates.
Correct. Yes.
So, Jason, this is right up your alley. Yoga, you might want to stay away from. That'll split you in half. Pilates.
I've butchered yoga, but never Pilates. Now you're talking me into this. That might be a good way to meet people too.
I will preach the gospel to anyone who will listen. Pilates is a wonderful time. Shout out to Studio MDR in Southern California for holding it down. Shout out to DTR Pilates helping out Brian Daboll, getting him ready for an important year where he's got to bounce back with his quarterback and Daniel Jones. And now he is walking in lighter, more confident, and with great hip and core strength at the helm of all that. Who among us doesn't want that? If you want that, we can get it to you here. Download, subscribe, rate, and review GoJo and Golic, and maybe it'll help you out with the Pilates front as well. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.